Let's zoom into Africa now, where representatives of the Democratic Republic of Congo and the Rwanda-backed M23 rebel group have signed a new framework for peace in eastern Congo. The agreement was signed in Doha following mediation by Qatari officials with support from the US and the African Union. In Senegal, a public struggle has erupted between President Bassirou Diomaye Faye and his Prime Minister Ousmane Sonko, shaking the nation's ruling coalition. This follows President Faye's decision to remove Sonko's ally from the presidency. For more on this and other stories making headlines on the continent, we're now joined by Nixon Katembo, who's analyst and executive producer at Swahili News for Channel Africa. Thank you so much for your time on the program.
Thanks for having me.
So a lot has been happening in Africa. Let's start with the representatives of the DRC and Rwanda-backed M23 group that have now signed a new framework for peace in eastern Congo. What does that mean now?
I think this is due to the pressure that has been coming from Emir of Qatar as well as Washington to see that both President Tshisekedi's government and the M23 leadership supported by Rwanda sign a deal, a framework for peace, and trying to see how the peace is going to return in eastern DRC. However, there are some issues that have emerged in the deal that is not really a detailed deal in a way that is generalization of key points that have to be discussed, such as issues of citizenship, issues of return of refugees, issues of return of ceasefire, and issues of return of government authority in rebel-held territories. So those are contentious issues that already they are going to now iron out, but they are not developing the current framework that they sign and deal, which shows a sort of a lack of political will on both sides to make sure that what they are talking about is implemented. Already yesterday, there was an attack in Masisi by the M23 who attacked the so-called Wazalendo militia supported by the government. So hours just after signing that deal. So one have to tread carefully whether this deal is going to really materialize on the ground.
Yeah, but also does that not now raise questions around just how genuine that framework would be, because you speak of political will now?
Certainly, the issues of implementations, what matters. And the details in this framework is what is important for both the Congolese people, particularly the government and the region as well. Remember, SADC troops were there just recently, and you know what happened to the South African troops. We still share, you know, the memories of those who lost their loved ones, and it's a quite a very touchy issue. People are still losing lives, and on the other hand, you have a generalized insecurity in eastern Congo on how this is going to be solved. I don't think that the government in Kinshasa, either the M23, are dealing with those issues strategically or that will ensure that a lasting peace happen in eastern DRC.
Let's turn our focus now to Senegal. Something is happening there that is shaking the nation's ruling coalition. Talk to us about that.
This is a very interesting, because both President Diomaye Faye of Senegal and Ousmane Sonko come from the youth movement, a civil society organization. If you look at the run-up to the election of Diomaye Faye, Ousmane Sonko, the current Prime Minister, was the person who was supposed to run for presidency, but he was frustrated by the system put in place by the former President Macky Sall. And a compromise then have to be made within the coalition of these opposition forces and the civil society to have Diomaye Faye take over from Sonko. And so Diomaye Faye himself was mentored by Ousmane Sonko. So you see a nexus between power contestation and a power struggle within the political movement of both leaders vis-a-vis what now is happening in the region. I should mention that both Sonko and Diomaye Faye are now kind of standing on a different extreme of the logical standpoint on how Senegal should be viewed in the international community, particularly with France. Sonko, as the Prime Minister, is taking stance by the West African leaders, i.e. the Sahel state, Burkina Faso, Niger, and Mali, saying that they should sort of a break from French influence. But you remember, Senegal is a very critical country in the West African region, one of the beacon of stability in that particular region, but also where France is invested heavily. So those geopolitical dynamics are playing out in the current political tension between the two leaders. And it remains to be seen how those leaders are going to deal with the issues on a more compromise to make sure that as they came into power on a youthful ticket, on a ticket of change, they respond to the aspiration of the Senegalese people without compromising the entire system. But also, their power struggle will dictate how Senegal is viewed. Of course, Senegal has been a beacon of democracy and stability, as I said earlier. And this, if those power struggles are continued, it may affect Senegal. But I should mention also that in terms of the structure of governance in Senegal, particularly with the presidential, same presidential system, both the president have a certain powers and the prime minister have a certain powers. They have to be derived from parliament. It will depend on how Diomaye Faye master the parliamentary support, or Sonko himself master the parliamentary support to either one of them remove the other from his position.
And also, you know, what you're saying now has prompted many analysts to come out and say that there's seemingly a trend in Africa in particular where there's never a clear succession plan when it comes to leadership.
And that is the point, really, where internal democracy of the party have to dictate the political succession. But you can see that this new movement emerging in the democratic processes in Senegal are having to struggle on how to arrange the succession plan. Two, to struggle on the policy positions when it comes to its relation, for example, with France, the geopolitical nature that comes in that particular political dynamics within Senegal. And I think that is more crucial for Senegalese. In my view, we can't afford as a continent a destabilized Senegal. It will be very detrimental to the region and to the continent at large.
Let's take it to Tanzania now. We understand that the President Samia Suluhu Hassan has announced an inquiry into the deadly unrest that erupted following her re-election. What are we likely to see come out of this?
Well, she did that in addressing Parliament and really announcing that she joined the families of those who lost their loved ones, and that security forces or the police must investigate to what happened, because there are some people who ran on a bandwagon and eventually died in the crossfire of what was happening. However, I think it has left the image of Tanzania reeling. Talzania has been a beacon of hope.
It's left a sour taste in the mouth.
Yes. Tanzania has been a beacon of hope, and I still believe that there's still something that can leverage. But that will depend on how internal political dynamics within CCM, the governing party, as well as the broader political dispensation within Tanzania, on how the opposition have been clamoring for constitutional changes, including the formulation of the Electoral Commission, the appointment by an independent body rather than the current framework within which the president appointed the commissioners. Those are issues that we're likely to going to see emerging in a proposal by the reconciliation that President Samia have proposed. But over and above, hope is not lost for Tanzania. I believe Tanzania can still emerge from this dent the image through the elections and make sure that the people of Tanzania and the region come first, because Tanzania is the beacon of a liberation movement for Southern Africa. And once things goes wrong in Tanzania or anywhere else in the continent, we are likely to see the ripple effects that are happening for the rest of the region and the continent. And
we've certainly felt it ourselves as well. I must thank you so much for your time. That is Nixon Katembo, who's analyst and executive producer for Swahili News at Channel Africa, sharing his insights on all things Africa. Thanks so much indeed for your time.
Thanks for having me.